Welcome, everyone, as we start the special segment known as For the Shabbos Table for this week's Parshas Re'eh, made possible by the generosity of the Reuben family with the Tefillah to Hashem that they should be zeicher to have a healthy Ben Zachar, also for their Hatzlach and Ruchnius and Gashmias. I would also like to dedicate this year especially for one of the most remarkable, kind, generous, skilled doctors that I know, a radiologist by trade, Dr. Mark Radin, who was injured in Baltimore in a bike accident, and we learned for his quick, speedy, complete recovery. Moshe Yitzchak ben Brindel Fega, he should have a refuah shalema b'seich sharchei Yisrael. I want to start off today's shir. As I tell you from time to time, one of the great benefits that I have from going to the Catskills in the summer is that I am in proximity with Camp Krula and have the tremendous privilege of davening together in the morning, most mornings with the Krula Rebbe. And the Krula Rebbe has already left because he's making a family wedding. It should be everything good. But the last word he told me this summer is something so practical that I want to share it with my entire Olam. He said that the Bnei Yissaschar quotes from a tzaddik echad. Why, after every davening, do we say Aleinu? So the Bnei Yissaschar, Zech Tzaddik Levrachas Chus Young and Aleinu, quotes this tzaddik echad, and if the Bnei Yissaschar is calling him a tzaddik, you can imagine he must have been really some tzaddik. Zech Tzaddik Levrachas Chus Young and Aleinu, that when we finish davening, many of us naturally have the feeling, what was my davening worth? This you call a davening? I mean, after davening, I spaced out. I didn't praise Hashem via Zdarv properly. You know, I didn't ask for things that I should have asked for. So the tzaddik, as the Bnei Yissaschar cites, says, so therefore we say Aleinu, where in Aleinu we say, Shalei sam chelkeinu kahem, that our portion is not like the goyim. V'gar Aleinu, and our lot is not kechol hamoinam, like the multitudes. Shehem mishtachavim lehevel v'rik, they bow down to vanity and emptiness. Umispallim el kel lo yoshia, el el lo yoshia, and they daven to gods that cannot save them. But we daven to the King who appoints kings, the Holy One. In other words, at least we're focused in the right direction. For that alone, what is it worth? It's worth that we're focused in the right direction. They're davening to sticks and stones. They're davening to pagan idolatries. They're davening to a multitude of deities. We're davening to the right place. For that alone, our davening is worth it. What a beautiful idea. This is an idea coming from the Bnei Yissaschar tzaddik echad. I've told you, just to add a caveat, I've told you this in the past, that the reason why we say Aleinu at the end of each davening, it's a little bit strange. Shouldn't we say Aleinu in the beginning of davening? Shouldn't we say before we start, Aleinu l'shabeach l'adonai kol, it is upon us to praise the boss of all? And the answer is that when we leave shul, we're saying to Hashem after every davening, Rabbeinu Shalom, I don't want you to think that I finished what I've had to say. There's so much more to thank you for. I didn't thank you for my liver. I didn't thank you for my pancreas. There's so much to thank you for, Hashem. But we have to get on with life. There's a lot of things that we have to do. And therefore we end every davening with Aleinu l'shabeach l'Adonai Kol. We have a lot more to praise Hashem for. In the main shir, we spoke about Re'eh and how we are told to inspect our lives, to take a good hard look, and a look with foresight, to consider the consequences. There's a very interesting sifurnai on Re'eh, on this pasuk. The sifurnai says, Re'eh anoichi noisen lifneichem hayom bracha uklal. You should know that there's two extremes. There's blessings and curses. Says the Sifurna, there's no Beinani in Avodas Hashem. Or like I like to put it, there's no pariv. It's either blessing or curses, no pariv. So now, you'll say, what does that mean? I'll give you one example. Here's a person, he has relationships in his shul. Now, there are people that, he has good chemistry with, and those are his friends. And then there are people that he doesn't like. So what does he say? He says to himself, look, I'm not nice to them. I just don't have anything to do with them. I'm parif. That's not good. We're supposed to be Talmid of Shalaron, Oyev Shalom, V'rodev Shalom. That's the meaning of Rodev Shalom. We're supposed to figure out how to get along with everybody. There's bracha, there's aftal re'ach kamoicha, and then there's klala, loisisna sachicha b'vavecha. There's no parif. Now, this is just one example of a very broad idea. Here's a person that, he does what he has to. He goes to shul, he davens in a minyan, and he doesn't eat anything that's not kosher, and he doesn't scream at his wife, right? But during the rest of his life, he's coasting. He's coasting through life. That's not good enough. I stay out of trouble. There's no pariv. Did he use every opportunity to be able to learn? Is he exercising the opportunity to smile at people? Is he taking the initiative to do? There's no pariv. To the contrary, what's a sin? A sin, chet, means a missed opportunity. It says that the slingshot specialist of David, loy chata, never missed. Time, represented by hours, shah means to turn. El kayin vel minchasai loy shah. To Kayin and his mincha, he didn't turn. Shah means to turn, to take a turn, to always do. Pasuk says, Es habracha asher tishmu el mitzvahs Hashem Elokeichem, blessing that you should listen to the commandments of Hashem your God, asher anoichi mitzave eschem hayom, which I commanded you today, ve'es haklala im lo yisishmu b'sartem min haderech asher anoichi mitzave eschem hayom, and you turn from the way that I commanded you today, Loleches achrei elihim acherim, to follow other gods, other interests, asher lo yadatem, which you didn't know, which you don't know. So the Chassam Sofer asks an interesting question over here. The Chassam Sofer says that I understand es habracha asher tishmo mitzvahs Hashem Elokeichem asher anochi mitzaveh eschem hayom. What's the asher anochi mitzaveh eschem hayom? We got the commandments at our Sinai thousands and thousands of years ago. What does it mean asher anochi mitzaveh eschem hayom? So we know what Rashi tells us. Rashi tells us b'chol yom v'yom yiyu beinecha kechadashos. Every day it should be like it was just given. It should be exciting. It should be fresh. But what does it mean on the negative? What does it mean? V'sartem min haderech asher anochi mitzaveh eschem hayom. Why does it say it by the Averis? So the Chassam Sofer says an interesting thing. The Chassam Sofer says that if we don't make the Yiddishkeit exciting, if we don't make the Yiddishkeit contemporary, that's going to cause the new generation to look for other things, to look for things asher lo yadatem, which they didn't know. They're going to look for new and exciting things. And this is a big challenge in chinuch, because if our mitzvahs are done because we have to, or they're done robotically, or they're done listlessly, then they're not going to be exciting, and then the children are going to look for other adventures. Then they're going to look for elihim acherim. That's what it means. If you didn't do it, then they're going to turn from it if they don't feel the excitement. This reminds me of a vart in chinuch that the great Rabbi Yitzchak Elchanan Spector said. It says by Shabbos, V'sham v'nei Yisrael sa Shabbos, La'asos es ha-Shabbos l'doraisam. The Bnei Yisrael should keep the Shabbos, to do the Shabbos l'doraisam. So it repeats itself. V'sham v'nei Yisrael sa Shabbos, La'asos es ha-Shabbos. Now, you could interpret it that V'shamru means to watch the prohibitions, not to do any of the forbidden malachas, and La'asos es ha-Shabbos is all the positives, the kiddush, and and the resting, and that's one pshat. But Rabbi Yitzchak Elchanan says a different pshat. He says, "V'shama v'nei Yisrael sa Shabbos." The Bnei Yisrael should keep a Shabbos. What kind of a Shabbos? La'asos es ha-Shabbos l'doraisam. It should be such a sweet, such an exciting Shabbos that your generations can't live without such a Shabbos. That's the kind of Shabbos you should keep. A Shabbos where there's such warmth and harmony. A Shabbos where there's such delicious memories. La'asos es ha-Shabbos l'doraisam, to ensure that the Shabbos will stay for the generation. That's this word that the Chassam Sofer is saying. The Chassam Sofer is saying that especially in our day and age, we have to make everything exciting. Because, we're combating a lot of glitzy distractions. And if we're not going to if we're going to, if a child sees the father that he's walking out on the rabbi's drasha, that child is never going to be interested to listen to a rabbi's drasha. And that's just a mini example, right? If the mother complains that Pesach is a burden, that child is not going to look forward to Pesach. That's why the Gedolim didn't find favor. It's a nice song, but they didn't like the song, Here Comes the Pesach Blues. Because the idea is to make out of preparing for Pesach, you have to give a Messiah to the children, that in the Warsaw Ghetto, they did the holy cleaning for Pesach, although they knew almost for certain that they wouldn't even be alive for Pesach. But they still went on cleaning for Pesach, because they made something exciting out of Pesach. The next thing that I'm going to share with you is along the same ideas. It's along the same ideas. It says, Kisava nafshecha lechol basar. If you want to eat basar taiva. You can eat basar. You can enjoy a steak. However, the pasuk says, Rak chazak levilti echel es adam. You shouldn't have blood. That's a big Torah prohibition. Ki adam hu hanefesh, because the blood is the life force of the animal. You don't want to ingest and be absorbed the animalistic life force of the animal. And then the pasuk finishes off, V'lo yisaychel hanefesh im habasar. You shouldn't consume the soul with the meat. Now, the literal translation of the pasuk, the way everybody learns the pasuk is the pasuk is reiterating, don't have the blood with the meat, because then you're going to be taking the nefesh bahamiyos of the animal together with the meat. However, the gain, the gain explains the pasuk. When you're dining on the meat, you shouldn't consume your own soul together with the meat. Now, this is a very, very contemporary idea. The dining on the meat is fueling your body, but you shouldn't make it the focus of your soul. You know, the soul is what drives our essential purposes of life. You shouldn't allow that the tomahawk steak should be a primary focus of your life. Because if you do, then you're eating up your soul together with the meat. That's the way the guy learns. And of course, this idea can apply to many things. There are people that are computer gamers, and they could play a computer game for hours and hours and hours, and it could consume them. They go to sleep thinking about it. So then they're giving their nefesh to the computer games. That's a tragedy. I told you, Rabbi Fran gave an example that he was in a cemetery, and in one corner of the cemetery he saw a very sad sight. On the stones, on the monuments, they had in the corner of the monument a picture of a bowling pin. And it said, "We lived to bowl." So then what they're doing is they're giving their nefesh to bowling. Now everybody has this challenge. There are people that give their soul to their business. They're so involved in their developing their business that they miss many of the milestones of their children and their wives or their husbands. So they're giving their nefesh to their business or to their career. You know, I like to play pickleball. But it can't be that I look forward to playing pickleball more than I look forward to looking in the Gemara. Because if I'm doing that, then I'm giving a part of my nefesh to pickleball. I remember I was zeicha when I went to the yeshiva of Staten Island to have as the mashkiach of the yeshiva of Staten Island one of the greatest talmidim of Rav David Kronglass, the mashkiach of Baltimore, Rav Gershon Weiss. He was the mashkiach of the yeshiva of Staten Island for over a half of a century, as long as he lived, till the day he passed away. And I remember when I came to the yeshiva in 1970, of course, more than a half a century ago, they had downstairs on the first floor, they had a ping pong table. And supper was from 6:30 to 8, then 8 o'clock was Musa Seder and Night Seder and Marav. So we ate supper from 6:30 to 7, and then from 7 to 8, many boys would play ping pong. And since there was only one ping pong table, so, there were the good players playing, and everybody else was cheering them on. Normally, Rav Gershon Weiss stayed in yeshiva till about 3 o'clock. Then he left after mincha. But for one reason or another, he was there that night, and he passed by, and he saw the excitement by the ping pong table. The next day, the ping pong table disappeared. I remember as a boy, I was very, very disappointed. But Rav Gershon, Zech Tzadik L'Bracha, Zchus Yagen Aleinu, Rav Weiss, obviously felt that he didn't want the boys giving their nefesh to the ping pong table. These are young boys. They could look forward to that 7 to 8 more than they're learning. You don't want to foster that. That's what we're talking about over here. Everybody has to work on this to their own level. We know in this week's parsha we have the famous law against cutting ourselves in grief. Why? Now there's many reasons for why lois is good. One of them is Bonim Atem LaHashem Elokeichem. You're Hashem's children, and as a royalty, Hashem's child, you're not allowed to mutilate the Tzelem Elikim. Also, because since we're Hashem's children, we can't overindulge in grief to the point of cutting ourselves, because we know Kol David Rachman L'Tavav. But the Rambam says something else. The Rambam says, look what it says at the end of the pasuk. Lois is going to do. Why lois is going to do? Ki am kodesh ato LaHashem Elokecha. Because you're holy. You're holy means, right, that we're all a chelik elikam emal. We're all a sliver of Hashem. And since we're all a sliver of Hashem, nobody ends. Right? We just go back. Right? We go back where we came from. We go back where chelik elikam emal. And therefore, since nobody ends, the grief is misplaced. If it's the end, the person ceases to exist, and then that's very, very horrifying. But since we're an Am Kodesh LaHashem Elokecha, it's just like somebody goes from New York to Florida. Person didn't end, he just changed location. For that, you don't cut. Leiseichel kol ta'eva. Now, before I say this last word for tonight, I want to remind you that after this, we're going to do the Mishnah Yomis. And also, I want to say that we are looking for sponsors as we do the first share for Chodesh Elul next week. To sponsor a share, 718-916-3100. Email me or text me, either text at 718-916-3100 or email to rmmwsi@aol.com. It says, Lo seichel kol to'eva. We're not allowed to have any abomination. I want to share with you a story that is related by the great Rabbi Zalman Meltzer. Zalman Meltzer, Tzadik L'Vracha, Surusi Yogan Aleinu. He says, there was once a Rav, and there were people in the Kehillah that didn't like him. That is, by the way, an occupational hazard of Rabbanim. First of all, the Rav has to sometimes tell people off and tell them they're not doing properly. And when he does that, people might not like him. Also, the Rav, part of his job is to give Musar. People don't like to be criticized. So what do? They instead find fault in the Rav, because if they find fault in the Rav, then they don't have to listen to what he says. That's called Dor Sheshafat Es Shefteh. That's a normal mechanism. So in this town, there was a group that didn't like the rabbi. They were looking for a chance to get rid of him. In the olden days, a big part of Rabbanas, it's not true today, but in the olden days, a big part of Rabbanas was kashrus questions. And they posed a question about an animal. There were some lesions on the animal, and the Rav Paskin that was kosher, he made a mistake. He made a mistake, it really wasn't. So they jumped on this opportunity. At that time, the great Poisik was the Kovner Rav, Rabbi Yitzchak Elchanan Spector. So they sent a letter to Rabbi Yitzchak Elchanan Spector saying that their rabbi made such a grievous error on the question of kashrus, which is metamtem es alev, and they wanted to know if this is a reason to send him away from his post. Now, great men don't become great men for nothing. Rabbi Yitzchak Elchanan Spector right away smelled that they weren't l'shem shamayim. They just didn't like the rabbi. So what did he do? He took the shaila, and with the great genius of Pilpul, he sent them the letter that the Rav was right, that the animal was kosher, proving it with all kinds of proofs. Then immediately afterwards, he sent a telegram that please ignore the letter, he made a mistake, and the animal is not kosher. The idea behind this was to show them that even the Gadol Adar could make a mistake, and that's not a reason to send someone away. In this month, as we bench Reish Chodesh Elul this Shabbos, we have to know that people that are guilty of giving their Rav a hard time or speaking about them negatively or discussing ill about the rabbi, they're playing with terrible fire. Look, we know that the Talmidei Rabbi Akiva died. They died from the most horrible death. And this was because they didn't give honor to their equals. We know that if somebody is mavazeh Talmid Chacham, the Gemara says, Ein refuah l'makasa. There's no cure to their wound. They are vulnerable to uncurable diseases. Rachmana litzlan lo yaleinu. There were a series of accidents in Eretz Yisrael. It reminds us of today, we're hearing such terrible accidents. 2 different choshev people, young people drowned in the Delaware. We hear terrible stories. Besides the terrible loss of chayalim every day. They asked Rabbi Elyashiv, after there was a series of accidents, women asked, what should they work on? Rabbi Elyashiv told them to work on Lashon Hara. But he said an interesting thing. He said, because if you work on Lashon Hara, you will automatically not talk bad about Talmidei Chacham. He says, because tragedies happen because of not talking properly about Talmidei Chacham. So this is something that needs a very special attention. We want to thank all of you for joining us and wish you all a very wonderful Shabbos.